Okay. Just as an official hello. My name is Bob Schultz. I'm a writer, producer. I'm an educator, both in academia and privately. I'm a mentor, and I've done all these things for the last 20, 25 years or so. Most of my work now as a writer comes from, of course, I write specs like everybody else, but most of my work as a writer comes from being hired to do rewrites on screenplays by independent producers. I do also do some rewrites on behalf of agents, managers, and so on who represent directors or actors and whatnot. As for the lecturing and educating, I've worked in academia in America and here in England, as well as privately for clients all around the world, including here in the USA, obviously. But in Australia, I go to Sweden every year. That's why I'm wearing my Stockholm shirt. And I've worked in Australia, Romania, America, Canada, all over the place, Poland. It's just a real honor for me to sort of be able to share my experiences with people who are trying to break into the industry or just maybe stuck on their script or have an idea and don't know how to turn it into a script. There's a tremendous amount of confusion about it, and also, even people who've been sort of doing it for a while, maybe they want help with the craft, or maybe they want help with just sort of how to deal with the fact that we're living in a day and age where, the barrier to entry is so low as far as people who can actually write screenplays. Anybody who can get screenwriting software can get their screenplay written. And it's sort of been kicked down the can has sort of been kicked down the road to distribution and making it and writing something independently that you can produce yourself. So I've been doing a lot of work in these areas, and rest assured it can be quite exhausting. I recognize the frustration that a lot of us are dealing with, but I hope we can sort of put some of those concerns to rest tonight. Hello to Jeldon, and hello to, I hope I pronounced that correctly, and hello to Teddy. Thank you for being here. I have a couple of pre-written questions here that were sent to the Facebook page a little while back, and Teddy, you have two of them. So why don't we start with a Teddy question? Teddy writes, that she's written this lucky series. I hope I got your pronouns correctly. That Teddy has written this lucky series say we have written this lucky series treatment, and a broadcaster picked it up and would like to produce it. What would our position be from there on? Teddy asks. Do we just sell the treatment and be out of it, or do we get hired as a part of the production as head of story or showrunner or something else? Teddy, this is a question that I get from a lot of people writing television, and I think that it's not one that has one specific answer. Everything is sort of negotiable when you're putting together a contract with other entities, right? You can decide not only what your role is and what your job is, but what your job title is, and so on. And the thing with negotiating contracts, particularly in television, is there are so many different entities and groups and people and organizations that have a say, or that have input, that are going to impact the process of making it into a show. You have yourself, you have the network, you have the actors, you have the other writers, you have the director or directors of the show. But then on top of that, a lot of networks have obligations to the writers union or the actors union, different lawyers, the governmental standards that are necessary. So it becomes a very complicated process negotiating these things. But as a general rule, with very little experience, you are very unlikely to become the showrunner of a show. Hello, Steve. Thank you for joining us. You are very unlikely to become the showrunner with very little experience. It's very important, not only in television, but also in features, for us to remember that writing, creating the show, and putting words on the page is very, very, a very isolating individual pursuit. But making the movie, making the TV show, whatever, is where you transition from working alone to being collaborative. And whenever you're working on something collaboratively, other people's what is important to other people's priorities becomes very important to the show. So for example, the role of a showrunner is not just to create it's not just to marshal the creative direction of the show. The job of a showrunner is also to be the point person when the network comes and says, we want to make this change, and the creative writers room says, no, we don't want to do that. Or you want to write these 8 episodes and here's what you want to happen in each one, but all of a sudden you get your budget cut. And so one of the episodes has to take place in one room in one building, do a bottle episode. Or the flip side, if your show does really, really, really well, the network's going to come and say, we need you to do 2 extra episodes. And even though you've written a very well-crafted, delicately balanced kind of arc for your series, or for your season of your series, all of a sudden you have to find a way to jam in 2 extra episodes. That happened to Ted Lasso last season, for example. And they had 2 episodes that sort of stand alone, and they kind of stand out as not being part of the overall narrative of the season. So very, very likely, if you write something that someone picks up and commissions, it's going to be, now you'll have someone to help you negotiate. I mean, there's not an agent or manager alive who will decline the opportunity to negotiate on your behalf when you've already done all the work of getting the show commissioned. They'll get their 10% for doing a lot less work. But so you'll have someone to help you out, but it's going to be important to sort of keep your expectations and your hopes reasonable, to not think you're going to be able to control a network show and millions of pounds to get the show up and running. Instead, it's going to be somebody who's sort of done their time, someone who's done their time in the industry, someone who has worked as a writer's assistant in a room and then worked in a room as a writer and written a couple of episodes that were well written and well received, and sort of earned the political capital, earned the juice to then say, I want to be a showrunner this time, and to earn that promotion. Being a showrunner is a promotion. It is not the entry-level job that we might be getting our first time through. So I would keep our expectations low, keep our expectations reasonable and manageable, and recognize that there are going to be decisions made on the show you created that maybe you don't necessarily agree with, because that's the nature of a creative endeavor, that's going to be the case. It's very important to remember, whether you're writing features or TV, that we don't get, like, the script is our finished product. What we want the show to be needs to be on the page, and that doesn't only include character, and that's not only structure and all these other things. It needs to be the emotion that we want to come out from the episode, and it's the tone of the episode, and it's the themes that you want to explore in the show or in the movie. So we, as writers, forgive me everyone, I have not yet sort of eloquently sort of encapsulated this philosophy. I'm still sort of working on it, chewing it over a little bit. But we as writers, our job is to stimulate the imagination. The real estate upon which our stories happen is inside the mind of the reader, right? So it is not just a question of that. That's why it's always a mistake just to do a dry sort of recitation of things we imagine are happening. He walks in the room, he sits down in the chair, he raises one eyebrow, there's a silent beat, blah, 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 right? All these things that we do feel like what a robot would observe when watching a movie, right? Our job as writers is to give the reader the gift of an emotional experience, to make them feel the fear or feel the humor or feel the excitement that you want out of a scene, which is true of all writers, whether you're writing novels or anything else. So you need to write in a way that is stylish and make it literature-like, in that anyone out there who's listening likely has a book that they read when they were younger that made them fall in love with reading. Your screenplay needs to tickle that same nerve of making people fall in love with reading. Since our job is to stimulate the imagination and get fizziness in the brain of the person who's reading, the director's job is to take that thing that you made fizzy in their brain and capture it on a screen. So what we're seeing in a movie or in a TV show is a director's encapsulation of how they received your story. And since we're seeing what happened in their brain when they received your story, it's going to be different from what is in your brain that inspired you to put that on the page. So, I mean, and I think that's great. We created that out of nothing in the mind of somebody whose job and who is excellent at making that thing visible to everybody else. If I tell you a story, if I tell 100 people a story all at the same time, the interpretation of that story, the way that story looks and feels and smells and tastes and sounds is going to be different. It's going to be 100 different ways, 101 different ways, because mine will be different too. I use this example all the time, and it's appropriate with the World Cup going on. I want everyone who's watching this now or watching the recording later to picture a football player. If I write in my screenplay, enter Charlie, a football player, right? What you're imagining right now will be different from everybody else who said this, right? You might be imagining a famous football player, a player from your favorite team, your child, or spouse or partner, if they play football. I'm picturing an American football player because I was raised in America. So for me, it's the NFL. Football means the NFL more than it means what I would call soccer. Male, female, different races, all these different things. We're all imagining something different. And that's great. That's what we want from our writing, is to stimulate imagination, not lock imagination out. Saying you have a character who's a football player is a lot more effective than saying, enter Charlie, in his 30s, black, 6'2", walks with a limp, wearing red shirt and black shorts and all of his football kit. The more that you sort of lock the reader out of the story creating experience, the less satisfying the experience of reading is, and so therefore the less likely they are to proceed with your story. I sort of turned your question about a specific thing, Teddy, into something more general, but hopefully I'm offering advice that everybody can enjoy as well. Okay, let's see here. Let's go back to, I saw another question. It was from, let's see. Jeldon, again, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, would like to know, is high stakes / conflict important after Act 2? Yes, the answer is always have, as writers, we should always have an awareness of the stakes that our characters must face. You would be astonished how many people I consult with. They come to me for an hour-long consultation, and I ask them the basic questions, the basic questions of the story. Who is the main character? What are they trying to accomplish? What are their goals, and how are they trying to and what's standing in it? What are the obstacles standing in their way? And I always say, okay, and then what happens if they fail to achieve their goals? The example that I always go back to is I had a client one time who said their goal is to try to make the Olympics, and I said, great, that's a fantastic goal. What are the stakes? What happens if they fail to make the Olympics? To which the answer was, I guess they just try again next time to get the Olympics, which is very, very, very low stakes. After Act 2 is when the stakes and conflict gets highest, in fact. Act 2 is where the whole story happens. Act 3, just very, very quickly, I mean, anyone who knows me knows I'm lying. I don't say anything very, very quickly. Why use 5 words when 100 words will do? But the Act 1 sets everything up, as we know. You introduce the characters, you introduce the goal. Act 2 is where the story happens, where they're in pursuit of that goal. They set up a plan, the stakes rise and rise. the plan gets interrupted or has to change or whatever else. There are wins and losses, there are gains and failures. But at the end of Act 2 is where the goal is achieved. Okay, we always think they achieve their goal at the end of the story. The end of Act 2 is where the goal is achieved, or fail to achieve. But it's the end of that journey is the end of Act 2. End of Act 2 also, though, is where you learn this lesson. You can jot this down. They achieve the goal, but achieving the goal somehow makes things worse. Okay, so let's take Star Wars as the perfect example. In the beginning, we meet the characters and so on. Then we get the call to adventure, right? We get the inciting incident. Here comes the hologram of Princess Leia saying, you know, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. Please bring the plans in this droid to the rebellion, right? She says bring them to Obi-Wan Kenobi, but she wants the plans brought to the rebellion, the Death Star plans, so they can find a weakness and blow it up. Okay, so that's Luke's goal now. Get the plans to the rebellion. So he does, right? They go to the Death Star, they get captured, Obi-Wan dies, blah, 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 all these other things happen. They meet Han and Chewie, they have fantastic space battles, all this stuff happens. At the end of Act 2, they escape the Death Star and get R2 with the plans to the rebels on the Yavin, at the base of Yavin, right? So then, here's how you can almost always identify in Act 3. If you're going to sit down tonight when we're done here and watch something on Netflix or watch something on any of the streaming services, anything that you've been meaning to watch, you can recognize Act 3 by a scene that in some way, shape, or form lays out all the stakes and the goal and the consequences for the rest of the movie. In Star Wars, it's the briefing room scene, right? They're all sitting there in the room, all the pilots sitting around. You got the wise old man with the beard with the plans up there on the screen, and it says, thanks to the plans brought to us by Princess Leia, if you go down the trench and you drop the torpedo into the trench, the whole thing's going to blow up and we're going to live happily ever after. Next scene is here comes the Death Star saying, you know, we're going to blow up the base in 15 seconds. Or 15 minutes. You have the plan, you have the goal, you have the stakes, and you have the ticking clock all laid out for us again in those two scenes. In fact, if you find somebody who has never seen Star Wars and don't show them the first 2/3 of the movie, the first 3/4 of the movie, and have them sit down at the beginning of that scene, they might not know who Luke and Han are. They might not know who Chewbacca is or who the Death Star is or anything else. But you know what? They're going to be able to watch that little short film that is Act 3. So when you ask me, are high stakes and conflict important after Act 2? The answer is they are the most important at that point, because you are now kicking off a whole new adventure, essentially. I always say Act 3 is a standalone short film. You see it in Star Wars. You see it in Mad Max. You see it in even things that are completely, the reality and the timelines are completely folding in on each other or out of sequence or whatever. You see it in Pulp Fiction. You see it in Everything Everywhere All at Once. You see it in all these things. You just have this moment where you just sit there and you watch and you're like, oh, here we go, kicking off Act 3. Now, that happens regardless of whether they achieve the goal at the end of Act 2 or not. In Fury Road, Mad Max Fury Road, they get to where they want to go, but it turns out that their ultimate goal is a failure because they're not able to find this promised land. The promised land has been mowed under. So it's like, okay, we only have one, there's nothing we can do. We can try to drive across this desert and hopefully survive and see what's on the other side. And then Max says, no, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go back and we're going to team up. We're going to go back. We're going to have to go back through the past. We're going to have to take down the Immortan Joe, and we're going to have to, and capture the water for ourselves. And then what happens for the next half hour, 45 minutes? They do exactly that. They tell us what they're going to do, and then they do it. Now, of course, just like any other story, short, long, book, movie, play, doesn't matter, television, they have a plan, and then the plan gets disrupted or interrupted, or they have to work around or get creative and figure it out, and often face their own fear or their own weaknesses along the way. But it's a well-structured movie is 2 movies. It's Act 1 and 2, and then it's a standalone Act 3, which serves to sort of show the final adventure in this new reality. So I really suggest that if you don't know where your act breaks are, or if they're a little wishy-washy or whatever, imagine where you can insert a scene where there's some sort of a briefing or an update, or someone telling somebody else, here's what we're going to do. Find that scene where you could start it with, okay, here's what we're going to do, right? Here's the plan. Here's what's up. James Bond does it in every movie. Goldfinger, it's, Goldfinger says, you know what's going to happen, Mr. Bond? I'm going to take this bomb, I'm going to put it in Fort Knox, I'm going to blow it up, and all my gold is going to become more valuable. And Bond says, I'm not going to let you get away with it. And of course, then he tries to execute the plan, and Bond gets in the way, and Bond's plan is, I'm going to stop you from doing it. It's funny because, in hero movies like James Bond or superhero movies or all these other things, there's always the joke that there's the moment where the villain always just tells the hero, here's my entire plan, when he should just kill the hero. But this is why, but that's how come Act 3 works so well. It's like we use it as a joke because it's so obvious. Now, sometimes you can be more subtle with it, right? But, they say, you have a group of teenagers who all hang out at the community center, and here comes the big evil developer, and they go back and forth and they try to figure out ways to not to prevent the developer from buying the building that the community center is in. And then at the beginning of Act 3, what is it? It's, what we have to do? We have to win the breakdancing contest. Okay, then you have a nice little montage of them all learning how to breakdance, and at the end they win the breakdancing contest. Rocky has a training montage before he goes into the ring. It's always this thing of like, this is what you can literally just tell the audience, here's what our characters need to accomplish, here's how they need to do it, here are the stakes if they fail, and here's the ticking clock that makes it happen. Okay. Steve, I don't understand the joke. Soccer is short for association football. Maybe it's not a joke. Maybe that's what it actually stands for. That's great. I didn't know the history. Hi, Lucy. Well, hope things are all well in Hamburg. For those of you who are just sort of joining us now, I see the numbers starting to creep up. Just so you know, I'm on like a 10-second delay between when I see your comments versus when I'm talking. So don't feel like I'm ignoring you. Just recognize that due to technology, there's like a 10-second delay between Zoom and the Facebook thing. I have okay, I have another question from Teddy, but first I'll take Steve's question. John Cleese once said they typically wrote 150 pages for each half-hour episode of Fawlty Towers, way more than 1 page per minute. How do you reconcile page count to screen time? Well, in a feature, the rule of thumb has, give me a second here, I'm sorry. In a feature, the rule of thumb has always been 1 page equals 1 minute. That's more of a guideline. It's never been truly, utterly that. But it's a good way to sort of start from. Now, shows like Fawlty Towers, like, I don't know if there are any fans of the show Moonlighting here. That was from the 80s, a fantastic screwball comedy that there are rumors that it's going to be finally released on DVD, getting some music issues sorted and everything. Moonlighting was fantastic, and also wrote many, many pages for an episode because the pacing of the dialogue was so fast. It was screwball comedy. They were always back and forth, very, very screwball-y and very traditional to the genre. So they took it longer too. Now, of course, with features, writing, figuring out the length of how many minutes a screenplay is more important from a budgetary perspective. More days means more excuse me, more length means more days shooting, which increases budget, and so on and so forth. With TV, you're very limited often. I mean, less so in the streaming era, but still pretty much so. That could change in the next 5 or 10 years, I suppose. But the length an episode can be of a show is very limited by how much real estate they have on their air So it seems to me that very likely, when Faulty Towers was being written for 150 pages for a half-hour episode, I mean, obviously that means there's a lot of stuff that was cut, but they wanted to find the funniest take of the funniest joke in the funniest scene for each one. So they wrote a lot and probably cut a lot before they started shooting, and then shot a lot, and maybe even did a little improving on set so that they could even further find these funny moments or find these beats or these silences or whatever that made the thing even funny. I mean, Faulty Towers is thought by many to be the greatest sitcom ever written. I would probably say it's certainly in the top 5 all time sitcom ever written, and that's worldwide too. I mean, that's a show that has a tremendous audience everywhere I've ever been, where some American shows, for example, really only appeal to American audiences. So, how they did it was, well, you get a bunch of funny people in a room and let them be funny for a while and write down everything funny they say, and then find in the process of making it, and certainly in the edit, find the funniest route. I would love to see what must be, how many episodes of that were there? 8 or something, some ridiculously small number, so we have to treasure each and every one. I'd love to see the outtakes. I'm sure that many of them are brilliant, but the answer is you can't really reconcile page count. 12, thank you, Steve. You can't really reconcile page count with length of an episode with time. Here's one that I love. There's a movie that I adore, one of my favorite movies of all time. I've been meaning to watch it lately, and I just haven't gotten around to it yet. Rewatch it. I've seen it, at least a dozen times in my life. Written and directed by John Carpenter. It's called They Live. A great independent film at the time, totally holds up and stays great. And there's a fist fight in it between Roddy Piper and Keith David in like a back alley where there's like a garbage skip and garbage cans, and they have this tremendously like ugly fist fight. There's like no style in it whatsoever, hitting each other over there with garbage cans. At the time, I'm not sure it's still true, but at the time that it was written, it was the longest fight scene in movie history committed to film, in any film ever. It's like 12 minutes long or something. 12 or 14 minutes long. You can probably find it online, I'd reckon. In the screenplay, it was 2 words long. Those words were, "They fight." The end. Now, of course, he was directing it himself, so he knew what he wanted. So it's a little easier to do that thing where you spark the imagination, because it was in his own imagination anyway. But also, from reading it, you would never know that they were going to have, what type of fight they were going to have, or how long it was going to take, or whatever. So it's important that reconciling in your mind duration and page count is going to change as soon as another director gets their hands on it. As soon as another person gets their hands on it, this would be hilarious if there was this type of fight. The longest kiss in movie history at the time, of course, I don't know if there's been another one since, was Pee Wee Herman in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, because somebody along the line said, wouldn't it be hilarious if the least romantic leading man in history had the longest kiss in movie history? So they went ahead and did it. It becomes something more than what you put on the page. So endeavor to sort of stick close to 1 page equals 1 minute. But if you're writing a pilot for a show, you can get to 60 pages instead of the 42 to 45 you might be thinking about. You can get to 30 pages instead of the 25 to 26 you might be thinking about. But also pay attention to what you're being told. If somebody is asking for a submission and they say none of our pilots are longer than 45 pages, then it's time for you to sit down and start killing some darlings. Because if someone says, I want a 45-page script, and you send them a 46-page script, they're going to say, well, if they can't follow directions now, they will certainly not be following directions when they're sitting there on our salary in our writer's room. So make sure that you focus on being in the neighborhood of the length that you want the show to be, but also that the people for whom you are writing that you're satisfying their needs, because they are the most important people. We need readers and producers and showrunners and everything on our side. We need them on our team. I need those people on Team Bob if I want the thing to go forward, right? So it means open communication, and it means being a good team player, and it means not being a jerk. The no a-hole rule that people follow in Hollywood is real everywhere, man. It is people. I follow it too. When I'm producing something, I would rather find a script that is a 7 out of 10 and a person who's a 10 out of 10 than a script that's a 10 and a person who's a 7, because I can rewrite a script, but I cannot rewrite a person. And so we need to make sure that as we move from being solo writers to team players, we start to recognize other members of the team are just as or more important than we are. To be fair, there have been plenty of times, this goes back to Teddy's first question also, to be fair, there have been plenty of times where I've written something on assignment, I turned it in, they said, thank you, it's great, it's perfect, here's your check, you're fired. That's just the nature of the business, man. They want their own people to come in and do the rewrites. They want their own people to maybe someone with a bigger name to do a rewrite, so that if you get this person who's a known excellent script doctor or ghostwriter to write the rewrite, all of a sudden bigger, better actors are more interested, and it becomes more about raising the money for the show to go forward than it is about writing the perfect story. I've done my part, right? I've shoved the snowball from the top of the hill and gotten it rolling. But as it grows and grows and grows and grows, that first initial snowball sometimes just gets completely lost in the giant snow boulder that is created. Please be sure to continue to post your questions in the chat. I will, if I've missed any, please repost it. I'm not going to be able to scroll back up all that much. I also want to point out just very quickly that I'm returning to the live lecture stage outside of academia anyway. This Saturday, I'm doing a course at the Queen Mary University in London for everybody. We're going to workshop your new ideas, or if you have a first draft that is going to, that you're having trouble with the rewrite, or maybe you started writing your idea, but you sort of stalled out on page 60. We're going to workshop so that everybody, no matter where your story is, we're pushing it up to that next level. It's called Road Test Your Idea. Is it a story yet? And if you'd like to come, I'm putting the information in the comments right now. And if you can't come, but you would like to get it, I'm going to also be putting a recorded version online following, but you can still sign up at that same link. So please come on out and take a look at what we're doing for courses. Also, at that same link, you can sign up for a one-on-one consult with me, or join one of my other courses. Or if you run an organization, or you have a group of screenwriters who maybe you would like to bring me in to speak to a group, all the courses I offer, most of the courses I offer, some of the new ones I have yet to put up there, are available there. So please check it out. I love to do these consults. I just did a consult with somebody on their pitch just last week or the week before, and Netflix requested their script. So hopefully we're going to have another one of my clients on Netflix very, very soon. Okay, so getting back to the questions at hand here, please post whatever questions you have. I have another one from Teddy from a previous previous attempt to get questions. Teddy, you're the biggest star on the show right now. Teddy is interested in writing for children's animated series. Is it better to reach out to a studio willing to pitch those treatments on their behalf to events like CMC or Cartoon Forum or Kidscreen? Or is it okay to attend as your own representatives and pitch yourselves? Here's the thing, Teddy. I am a big believer in pitching yourself, because when you're pitching your story, you're also pitching yourself as an entity to work with, as a person that somebody might want to work with. I mean, look, this is an area where animation is an area in which I am not particularly experienced. And so I want to check in with a couple friends of mine who work in animation to get their take on it. But my feeling is that animation is a production decision, not a writer decision. If I write a screenplay, that if I write a TV show or a screenplay or something that is really well written and a good story, an interesting story, and somebody says, I want this to be live action, someone with the power says, let's make this animated, or someone with the power says, let's make this live action, or a combination of the two, it's not my, I don't have any say in the matter, right? It's how they produce it is up to them. So if it's a production decision to animate versus doing it live action, then if we can extrapolate from that, that the way to get, if the way you envision your story is as an animated series, that you should be pitching animation studios. And the best way for you to sort of contact a bunch of them at once and sort of build your collection of contacts is to go to these forums and so on. Then yeah, you should definitely be doing these forums. It's so much of the industry is about who you know and who's willing to take a risk on you and who they know and so on, that the sooner you start meeting people who can get that animation going, the better. Pardon me for a moment. Because it's very rarely a thing where, very rarely a situation where Teddy writes something and someone brings it to somebody and they say, oh, look at this screenplay by Teddy, I like it, let's make it. More likely, it's you submit a screenplay to somebody and they like it, and so you get on a list of people whose work they like. It's basically you've passed the audition. Basically, you've passed the audition. So then you can, at that point, be on a list where someone says, okay, now I want to do a screen. I feel like we want to do a story about, we want to adapt Charlotte's Web again. So we need someone who can do a rewrite on Charlotte's Web. Well, that Teddy writer submitted something. Why don't we give them a shot? So, and then eventually you sort of built up the credibility that you can do something, to the point where the more they need somebody to do the thing, you become the person, until eventually they say, okay, what have you got? Right. And so you sort of earned you've gone up in their estimation enough that that they will offer you work rather than expecting you to just work off your specs. So few specs get made, especially in television, but they work as a foot in the door to the industry, to show you can write, in other people's voices and so on. So that is what you need to sort of make your spec script accomplish. Now I see in the chat, Teddy is saying that she's an artist first and just starting on the writing journey. So the intention would be to create the visual concept to go along with the story. I mean, the intention's great, but let me ask you this instead. If somebody were to read your script who's not from an animation studio and say, we're going to give you £100,000 for this script, but we're going to make it live action, would you turn down the money because you envisioned it as an animation? I'm thinking probably not. As we get through my 10-second delay, I think I'll probably see you say no, you would take the money. I think that's the right decision. You envision it as an animation, but someone else envisions it another way. The flip-flop could also be true. Yeah, they can have it, exactly. The same can also be true of classics. The first filmed adaptation of Lord of the Rings was animated, rotoscope animated. The iconic one was live action. So it's really not up to us. Now, if you want to be hired as an artist, let's say, and if your intention is to be hired as an artist or an animator or something, and you are writing something in order to sort of audition yourself to be an animator. So you're writing something that suits your animation very strongly, your animation style, so that you can really sort of bring yourself to the foreground. Then what my recommendation would be is write a 3-minute version of your story and animate it yourself. And I'm not saying that dismissively. I know that 3 minutes is still an awful lot of animation, but a 3 minute animation that you can make yourself with your own artistic renderings and so on, and make it and put it on YouTube or submit it to festivals or something. Because if what you're trying to be is something more than just a writer, if you have slashes or hyphens, if you have hyphens between, right? So you're a writer slash animator slash director. That's great, but you need to show those skills off. Writing is hard to break into, and so is animation. But you know what? Animation you can show what you got more effectively with animation, with a visual representation of it. If you've heard of the director Fede Alvarez, I will put his name in the chat. Fede Alvarez. Fede is a working director in film right now. He got his break by just sitting down with a piece of software, I don't know if it was After Effects or something, and making a 3 minute, 5 minute, something like that YouTube video that had really no story. It was just, aliens invading Earth. So, you have the spaceship coming out of the fog over the Golden Gate Bridge, and you have lasers shooting down, and you have people running and screaming. You have all this stuff, right? Just to show what he can do, and put it on YouTube. Didn't charge anything for it. Didn't put it into festivals or anything. Just put it on YouTube, and then started trying to get the word out to people who can make a difference. To say, if you can just find 3 minutes, watch my sizzle reel. Watch what I can do. And he did, and it somehow Sam Raimi wound up seeing it. And who do you suppose directed the remake of Evil Dead? But Fede Alvarez himself. He got his job. He got his career going as a film director by just doing it himself, until someone came along and said, "Do it with us too." If you're trying to be an animator, you're trying to be an artist, you're trying to be a director, that is what you ought to do. Writers too, man. I've written shorts. I'm trying to produce a short right now. But I'm producing it too. I wrote a short that could be made inexpensively. I went to a director I know, and I said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing this?" And he said, "Look, man, it's not quite right for me, but my DOP on the movie I just did wants to get back into directing. Do you mind if I pass it along?" I said, "Sure." They said, "Sure." So now we're sort of working on it together. I'm still getting my act together to raise the money on it. But it works but you'll see the process I made as a producer was to start with people I know, and then move on to people who they know, who they recommend to me. It was not, I'm going to go to a convention and meet every director I possibly can and hope I get the right one. It was not cold calling or query letters or any of this stuff. It was getting to meet people so that people want to work with Bob more than they want to work on Bob's project. And sometimes it's hard to find people who you're creatively aligned with, or people who sort of have the same feelings or have the same influences you have. And sometimes even if you find somebody who you have the same creative vision as, it can take months or years before of talking and hanging out with the person and having shared appreciation for each other's work or for other works out there that we weren't involved in, whatever. So finally it's like, this would be right for us to work together on, finally. It's like it's any of you who are like writing one screenplay and then going around with it for 5 years trying to find the perfect place to set it up, I think is a mistake. You need to have many irons in the fire at the same time. You need to have things finished. You need to definitely have a document, of title logline of at least 10 projects that you've either started to develop, or ideas that you've had, or things that you've actually written or have an outline for. Because even if somebody likes you, they might not be that interested in that project. And the question number 2 is going to be, what else have you got? And if you don't have anything else, then that's the end of that conversation. And also I'd recommend find your niche, find your lane, that suits you best. I will be the first one to tell you, I love science fiction. I will watch gritty, down-to-earth science fiction. I will watch hard science fiction. I'll watch sci-fi fantasy. I'll watch all these sci-fi stuff. But I cannot write that stuff to save my life. It is just not where I write. Everything comes off sounding forced and stupid and overwhelmingly like spacey, you know. Look out, Gleep Glorp, you owe me 10 space dollars. I intend to get it back. You know, it's terrible. It is forced and terrible. That is not where my writing lane is. But where my writing lane is my own unique sort of place, which I've only developed over the last few years, and that's going to change, you know, as life goes on. But my lane is more insane, wacky, broad concepts, high concepts that you can pitch on very few words, and then delivering on the product that if the pitch is funny and the title is funny, then and broad and exciting, then the story itself ought to be funny and broad and exciting also. And that's just where I live, man. You can email me at the email address I sent you there, and I'm happy to reveal what some of my projects are. I don't necessarily want to do it on Facebook, but email me, and I'm happy to give you a couple of my pitches. And for me, it works. I mean, if you can't follow through with the scripts, don't do it. But from where pitching is concerned, the most successful pitch I ever had in my life in terms of getting script requests was 10 words long. My second most successful pitch was 10 words long. My most successful pitch was one word long. I say it, people laugh and they start asking questions, and then the next thing you know, they're saying, "I'll read it," you know, and and then once they've read it, they say, "I will never make this movie, but can you please, but we have a little money for a rewrite on this other movie and we need you to punch it up. Will you punch it up?" And so that's why I get ghostwriting gigs and punch up gigs and rewrite gigs and so on, because the screenplays that I write, I would love to see a couple of them get made, man. I think they would be hilarious and fun. But more importantly, they serve as someone to read it and go, "I get Bob now. I know what a Bob Schultz script is." And so if I need that, he's who I'm going to contact. And that's much, much more valuable to you if you want to make a career out of this. If you just want to make one movie, because, you know, if you're writing as a hobby, that's great, man. I support you fully. And you want to see it get made, you really, really need to write something you can make yourself these days, or at least that you're willing to make yourself. I think that people in the industry very often respond better to you if your attitude and the project is more about, this train is pulling out of the station, you can be on it or not, rather than you sort of going hat in hand and begging for them to deign to consider making your screenplay. There's not a producer out there who produces anything who has any fewer than 20 things that they are hoping to make, they said they would make, they are committed to making, they have an option on that the option's about to run out. If you want to be on the bottom of a very long list, going out and begging is the way to do it. If you want to move to the middle or top of that list, then making something yourself, even if it's not your thing, if you make something shorter, smaller, easier, and sort of building that audience and building that credibility, that's going to serve you better every single time. Let's see here. Do we have any other questions there? I see that Lucy is double jury narrative, nonlinear written. Let's see, what do I have for questions? Great advice, find your niche. I got hired because German, and so is the mom of the book of the author. Right, you never know what's going to get somebody interested, right? Being a well-rounded person is a great way to do it. Like, look, this is a piece of advice that I wouldn't consider it advice. It's just something that worked for me operating in America. But in my life, I've traveled around America a lot. I used to, when I first got out of school, I the internet was just sort of in its, it's the dawn of the internet. And it's particularly as a way to find jobs. And what I did was, after school, I knew I wanted to write. So what I would do is go online, find like a 6-week, kind of tech writing assignment, 6-week kind of like tech writing assignment. Lucy, if you could please just repost the question. Oh, maybe I can try to find that treatment question. Gotta go up, gotta go up, gotta go up. I'm sorry, I don't have, if whoever posted the question about treatments could please repost it, that would make my life a little bit easier here on the old chat. So I traveled around the country and just sort of, thank you, Lucy. I went and sort of drove, took a 6-week assignment someplace, drove there, did the writing assignment, then looked for a new job, drove around. So I wound up driving around America a lot. And along the way, I just came to have an awareness just by existing in the world of the names of different sports teams in different cities all around America. I recommend all writers read sports journalism, by the way. But as a result, whenever I met somebody in LA, because very few people are from LA, and I say, where you're from? And they'd say, I'm from Chicago. It's like, oh, go Cubs. Right, and immediately have this connection with them and sort of get that small talk thing going. There's not a single person in the world who likes networking. And even worse, we dislike networking events, but it's a skill you need to develop, man. If you can avoid socials and networking events, more power to you, but there's always going to be a situation where you need to make small talk with somebody who's in the industry, and you can't just be like shaking hands with somebody and saying, I'm a writer, here's my pitch. You need to sort of work it in and sort of get to a situation, have a conversation naturally come about. So the more you sort of get out there and chat with people and step on your own tie when you're trying to do it, whatever, is great. A client of mine is creating a sort of multimedia, interactive, role-playing, LARPing kind of combination world situation. And she went to the Comic-Con this past weekend to sort of start building her awareness and building her mailing list and this sort of thing. And so I went with her. I'm like, okay, support my clients. I'd be happy to go and hand out cards and try to help get people to join your mail list or whatever. And while there, I just started talking to people. I recognize, how do you start talking to somebody who is a stranger? Well, at a comic book convention, what you do is you have an awareness of sci-fi, fantasy, comic books. And if someone is dressed in a particular costume or has a t-shirt honoring a particular piece of media or something, you walk up and you say, I love that thing, right? And you can only do that if you have an awareness of all the different projects going on. I'll tell you what, I saw plenty of people in Star Wars costumes, and I saw plenty of people in Stranger Things costumes. What I didn't expect was this fantastic woman who had just regular clothes on, but had a googly eyeball just stuck to the middle of her forehead. And I knew she was Michelle Yeoh from Everything Everywhere All at Once. And I jumped out of my skin. I'm like, what a great costume. You look fantastic. Right. And as a result, I managed to get the conversation turned to the project that my client is doing. And the rest is history. So having an awareness of the world, knowing what's going on, knowing what shows are big, what movies are popular, we're getting close to award season. And if someone says to you, what do you think of Everything Everywhere All at Once? The right answer is never, I haven't seen it. You have to be able to say something about it, even if you haven't seen it. I'm so surprised to see such a movie go. I love that they took a risk with the story. I think that Michelle Yeoh's the best. Whatever it is you can say, just being able to know what a project is or its position in the zeitgeist is going to serve you a lot better than, I just didn't see it. You need to learn how to have conversations and keep conversations going. Okay, so Lucy's question was, I'm doing an adaptation for a writer from Palo Alto, go California, but it's mostly inspired because I have to take so much, it's mostly inspired by because I have to take so much artistic license. There's no real story, so I had to make one up. It has a total time frame of 50 years. Question. I want to write a treatment because I had to dramatize the first draft for the rewrite process after editing all the other stuff, like re-outline synopsis or anything. Is a treatment a waste of time, or what are your thoughts? Without knowing everything about this project, first of all, if you've been hired to write the project, then your client's word is bond. What the client wants is what the client gets. So therefore, it's not a waste of time. You know, within the confines of your contract or your agreement letter or whatever it is, if you are meant to provide a treatment or whatever. But I would say, first of all, two things. First of all, anything that helps clarify the story is good. Okay, there's no bad reason to, there's no bad steps if it helps clarify the story and the characters and the goals or whatever. Now, in a story like this, I see when you say you're doing an adaptation, you're adapting a book. Novels can be a little less story driven and a little bit more experiential. But yes, you need, but screenplays are much more momentum driven and laser focused and story oriented. So you need to find the story in that adaptation. Now, the second thing I wanted to say about writing a treatment is the more important one, which is we should always write treatments. I hate it, and I know that it's true. It's a memoir. It's just the same. Memoirs more so than anything else. I do a whole course on writing biopics and nonfiction, and the trick is that, look, if someone has their calculator out, you can do the maths, but I turned 52 in August, so I'm 52 plus 4 months, nearly. I don't know how many days that is, so take 52 years plus 4 months times 365 days. I don't know how many hours or minutes that is, but I'm guessing I'm in the millions and millions of minutes that I've been alive. If you're going to write a story about me, it's going to be 90 minutes long or 2 hours, 120 minutes long. So how do you take 2 million minutes and turn it into 120 minutes? You do that by leaving a lot of stuff out, and you strip away the stuff that does not suit the through line of the story that you're trying to tell, right? So that's why so many biopics of, let's say, musicians hit all the same beats. They come from a background that maybe they're oppressed in some way. They can only act out through their music. Somebody somewhere along the way, a manager or a club owner or someone sees them and goes, man, you got something special. And then they rise to the top, right? It's whether it's Bohemian Rhapsody, whether it's Man in the Moon, whether it's the Elton John movie. They all sort of hit those beats all the time. They are very specific. In fact, if you want to see one that does it great in a satirical kind of way, there are two now. There's Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story, which is one of the funniest movies you'll ever see, and Weird, the Weird Al Yankovic biopic that just came out that has almost no reality in it whatsoever. So you should definitely take this memoir and find a story that needs to be told, or two stories if it's a double journey narrative. Now, the reason that you always want to write treatments is because not only to help you clarify the story, but at some point in your journey from writing the story to the movie being produced, to finding funding, to getting somebody to star in it, to all these different things, the story needs to go out to many, many different people. And most of those people who you're trying to reach out to, this is true of everybody. Everybody in this room, everybody watching this recording, myself, Wayne, anybody in the world, this is true. And it's the most important thing for us to remember as writers trying to get your stuff made, is that the most precious, rare, valuable commodity that anybody has is their time. And it is up to us to recognize and respect that people giving us their time are entrusting us with the thing that is most valuable to them. So lots of people are just not going to be ready, willing, or able to spend 2 hours reading your screenplay. They're just not. Some will, some won't. Some will say they're going to do it and they'll read the first 10 pages and then just put it down. There's all sorts of things in between. So having a treatment maybe a few pages or one-page treatment. I do a course on writing one-pagers also, is a very valuable marketing tool for you to have. Someone maybe isn't convinced about your pitch and they're like, I don't want to read the whole screenplay. Do you have a one-pager? And you need to be able to say, yes, I do, and email it to them. They're willing to give you enough time to read a page, but they're not willing to give you enough time to read 120 pages, and that's reasonable for them to say. Remember, the people to whom you are speaking, the people to whom you are pitching, the people who you're working with, are not committed to your story the way that you are. Your brilliantly written, excellently crafted, wonderful, beautiful allegory for the human condition to them is just number 75 on their to-do list for the week. Right? It is so important that you recognize that people who we're talking to, people who are trying to get on board for our screenplays or to drive our screenplays or direct it or anything else, have other things in their lives that are more important to them. They have different priorities. They have the same priorities we all have, but it's different for them. When I sit down to write, I try to make my writing time sacred, and I write and I grind it out, and I think it's fantastic, and I laugh at the jokes. I also hate it at the same time because I'm a writer, so therefore I love and hate myself in equal measure. But then I give it to some, but there are times when I can't do it. I have to go to the doctor. I have to pay the bills. I have to do the day job. I have to, my wife has a party at her work, and I'm going to that. There are weddings, there are funerals, there's illness, there's 50 million things that are going on, and therefore real life gets in the way. Well, the people to whom we are talking also have all that. Okay, the people to whom we are talking are not godlike mystical beings of the film industry who don't have real lives. They are human beings who might maybe be not that interested in staying in that job, or who are exhausted or just getting over something. And, look, this is the example I use all the time. You can write the perfect romantic comedy. It is brilliant and funny and fizzy and exciting. And in the end, love conquers all. And if the person who you give it to is just going through a divorce, they are not going to want to read a love conquers all story. They're just not going to be into it. And it's not going to be right for them at the time. And that's okay. The advice I always give, you've probably all heard this advice. You've probably all heard this advice, and I'll state it. The advice that we all hear is finish your draft, stick it in a drawer, and then come back to it, a week later with fresh eyes and take a look at it. That advice is fine. I think it's a good habit to get into. I do it. But more important is to finish your draft, stick it in a drawer, come back to it in a week, and read it with not fresh eyes. Read it on a day where you're exhausted. Read it sitting on the train when you're jostled around and you got a seat, but the person standing right in front of you has their butt in your face. Read it when you're waiting for to drop off your kids at school. Read it when you didn't get any sleep. Read it when you're stressed out from something in your work. Read it in a circumstance where it is not ideal to read it. And if in those circumstances you can't get through your script, then it's time for a major rewrite to engage people's brain. That's why we always say the first page has got to grab somebody. It's got to be emotional or action-packed or whatever it is. And the style with which you write needs to be something where someone laughs or someone is delighted or someone just appreciates your fondness for the language that you are using as your tool, as your clay that you're crafting with. If I read one more screenplay where the first page is just boring setup and it's a lot of we see this, we hear that, we do the other thing, instead of really getting my heart and soul into this story, I'm just going, it drives me insane. It's insanity to do that. Oh, it gets good on page 3 is not good enough. It is not good enough because I have a stack from the floor to the ceiling of screenplays that I'm supposed to read. I mean, that's a metaphor because they're all on my hard drive now, but of screenplays that I have to read. I have screenplays for clients I have to read. I have screenplays for university students to read. From university students that I need to read. I have screenplays from friends who've done me the favor of reading my screenplays that I wanted to return the favor. I have my own screenplays to work on. I have screenplays for an actor's agent who wants a particular character boosted up. I have a screenplay for a sci-fi movie where I need to change the characters without changing any of the scenes around. There's just so much going on in my mind, not to mention things like, eating and sleeping and going to the doctor and going to the store, Christmas shopping, that it's real life that is our biggest hurdle to have to overcome with our writing, that we have to break through. And the more that we remember that the people to whom we are speaking are human beings with human being concerns, the better. Not to mention, I'm just as tempted as everyone else away from doing the constructive thing. I can spend 15 minutes on Twitter. I can watch a movie or a TV show. I was telling Wayne just before we got started here that I had my thing on mute because my wife and I were watching Eggheads, and I was doing terribly with the questions. And I'm like, I can't have Wayne overhearing that I'm doing terribly with the questions on Eggheads, so I'm just going to mute that. Instead of doing something to promote this, I was roped in by a quiz show. So remember that the reality of the circumstances in which our scripts are going to be seen or read or appreciated are often the not great circumstances. My boss said I have to read this script too. I was just going to go home and take a bath tonight. Now I got to read this screenplay. It better be good, or I'm going to find the writer on social media and I'm going to shout at them. I've never done that, but I understand the temptation to do it. Now, I work for myself and I'm a freelancer, so I can decide what jobs to take, what jobs I don't. But people trying to break in, people who are trying, doing an internship or or just breaking into reading or the writer's room at Channel 4 or something, BBC, they are really weighted down with a lot of responsibilities, and we need to respect that. So think in terms of when you're writing. Please remember, writing is about the experience of reading, in the same way that acting is about the experience of watching the performance. So what experience are you providing to the reader with what you write? If it's just a bunch of stuff happening that is boring, that doesn't even use words that are exciting or phrasing that is interesting, then what kind of experience are you offering? It's the simplest question, and yet so few writers ask it of themselves. The first thing I ask many new clients, not all of them, but many new clients, if they send me their work and I read it, the first question I ask them is, we get on Zoom these days, and I say, I want you to read to me the first 3 pages, read them out loud. And you'd be amazed how many of them can't get through page 2 and go, oh, this is dreary. Oh, this is such a dreary experience reading this. I'm like, yeah, well, what do you think it means and you love this script and you find it to be dreary. So what do you think the person who has no emotional commitment to this script is going to feel about it? Right? Read your scripts aloud, and remember that, people love The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. One of the books that I love most in my life is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I read it when I was 15 years old or whatever. And it's not just the story that makes it great, it's the way Douglas Adams wrote it. The ships hung in the air in the same way that bricks don't is clever and witty and funny. So even if you're not writing a comedy, you still need to be witty. You still need to have wit. Stephen King writes wittily. He writes characters that we can love and then drags them through hell and back. And he writes it in a way that's easy to digest and easy to read, even back in the days when he was writing 2,000-page books because you could get away with it. Okay. Any other questions? What else we got here? Have I missed any? Wayne, Lucy, any that I missed that sort of skated on by? I don't have any more in the chamber, so I'm willing to I've been here an hour, but I'm happy to take more questions if anyone else has them. Lucy, I haven't been following the entire conversation in the chat, so I don't know exactly what you're talking about. But the problem with something is that with the first 10 pages, all have been full of praise for that, but you would expect a political thriller, one actor told me, instead of a family drama action adventure. Well, look, I mean, look, Lucy, I haven't read your work, and I assume that, and I'm, you know, I have, so I can't say with any sort of definite awareness or anything, but it does seem to me that if your first 10 pages are selling a story that the rest of the pages don't deliver, then that's a problem with the writing. I mean, yes, I understand the impulse to sort of hear someone's critiques and think they just don't get it, but it is at least in part our job to allow them to get it, to put them in a situation, to put the reader in a circumstance where getting it is something we make easy for them. So if someone at the first page, if the first page is selling a political thriller and then the rest of the screenplay doesn't deliver a political thriller, then a first page rewrite is probably a good approach, a good idea. Or, you know, I don't think you necessarily want to rewrite the whole rest of the thing to deliver the political thriller, but if what they're saying is it sounds like a great political thriller, then definitely keep that page for something to work on another time. But it needs to sell the movie that you know, page one, the job of page one is to get someone to turn to page two, and the job of page two is to get someone to turn to page three. So if if your page one gets someone to turn to page two at the expense of page two following it properly, then yeah, it's tough. But yeah, I agree with you. You need to change the opening, and I agree with you. It's probably also is great action, so definitely save it. And you can probably use it with very small tweaks for something else. Nothing ever goes to waste, after all, if you're a writer. And there was something in that page that made it effective that you wrote. So that means there's something in it that inspires you. So the more that you can get inspired by your own writing, the even better. Maybe you want to turn it into a spec. Maybe you want to pitch something else some other way. I see, is it Liat? Asked a question about whether I do regular, if you have anything in the pipeline for regular courses. I have a couple. I'm doing one on this Saturday at Queen Mary University of London, where we're going to workshop people's ideas and early drafts. You can go to this link that I'm posting in the chat right now to sign up for that. Fiat, thank you, Liat. And also, you know, I put my email address there too. You can email me if you want to do any one-on-one consults and so on. I'm also doing a course on the following Saturday, the first Saturday in December, on writing a pilot, right? And if you'll give me just a moment, I will find the link to that. You know, I'm calling it basically just Nail Your Pilot, but it's a pilot writing course. It's not about writing an entire series. It's about writing a pilot specifically, the beats you need to hit and how to write it very well. Writing the pilot, the gateway to TV and streaming success. Here is a link to that. Where are you? There you are. Here's a link to that. I'm doing that through the London Screenwriters Festival, so it's a different link. You know, if that interests you, go ahead and do that. And of course, that email address, bob@north7.co.uk. Please email me all you want, or you of course now know how to contact me on Facebook as well. Please friend me, and I'll be happy to friend you too, and we can communicate there as well. Steve is asking, I have a tame DOP who has promised to shoot a short for me. I just have to select a good script. Is there any way of making money from a short, or will it be mostly for the fun of it? It's likely to, Steve, thank you for the question. It's likely to be for the fun of it, and also a sort of a way in to the, I'll post the email in the chat there for you, Lucy. It's likely to be an audition piece, a short, or a way to break in. making money from a short isn't necessarily easy on its own. But you can use it as a calling card and to sort of get yourself into places where people who can make decisions might be. Enter it in festivals, post it online, and get people going. There's a, basically, if you're able to demonstrate that you are a good writer or a good filmmaker and actually get stuff done, you will. Just give me a second here. Basically, if you can show that you're someone who gets stuff done, people are going to be all of a sudden start being attracted to working with you. You make the ground fertile for things to grow, and all of a sudden things grow. You know what I mean? So, look, there are examples of short films that served as proofs of concept that eventually became feature films. The one that comes off the top of my head right now is a movie called Cargo, which is a great little zombie short. Definitely find that, it's on YouTube, which then became a feature-length Netflix movie, which is great. There are others too. I can't think of any directly off the top of my head. I've been talking straight for an hour and a half now, so I'm starting to get a little woo. But even if you don't write one that turns into a proof of concept for a feature length, then you can still build an audience that way. I don't have the link for it at my fingertips, but in the chat right now, I'm putting the name of a short film. It's called It's Not About the Nail. 2-3 minutes long, I want to say, maybe as many as 4. I don't really recall, but it is short and it is clearly inexpensive to make. 2 people sitting in a room having a conversation on the couch. There's one major prop in it. Otherwise, it could be cheap. They probably shot it over a weekend. And if you look for it and see it on YouTube, you're going to see that it has in the tens of millions of views. Now, imagine you are writing something, you've written something that you want to produce, and you're trying to get somebody on board to do it. Do you think it makes more sense? Do you think you get more traction by saying, here's my feature that I've written, please read it, or by saying, here's my feature that I've written, please read it, because, and if you think that you'd like to work with me, I have this short, here's the link, and you'll see that I have 14 million followers already, which means that the person who's putting the money up says, well, 14 million followers probably results, even if only 1 in 14 of its fans sees the movie, that's 1 million ticket sales straight off the bat, right? So you're going to start to raise a little bit of money off of the fact that your short was so well made and popular, and you did a good job getting the word out about it. So, the trick is it's easy to produce a short. It's not that hard at all. What's difficult to do then is get it out there and sort of raise your voice above the millions of other people who have written a short, and get noticed and get seen by the right people and so on. So again, the more you're able to make contact with people and get involved in communities and help other people out and meet other filmmakers and so on, the more it's going to suit you. Because when I get my short out there, when I write to the people who I've worked with on my podcast and the screenwriters and producers and directors from Hollywood that I've met with before and so on, who have become friends, the more they're likely to say to their friends, hey, here's a link to a buddy of mine's thing. But as long as it's good, they're not going to vouch for you and damage their own reputation, no matter how good friends you are. Lucy has one last question regarding what else have you got? It's my first feature script in English, and I've only written shorts before. Awarded. Question: does it count as a calling card too? Yes, definitely have. I mean, what I would do is collect those shorts onto one like YouTube channel or something, or one Vimeo channel, so that you're not giving people 6 different links, right? It's like all your shorts are collected into one place. If they haven't been made yet, then that doesn't help you quite as much. But what else have you got needs to be, I mean, look, I'm not one who necessarily advocates for, let's say, creative exaggeration, but I think you should do some creative exaggeration. I have a list of probably 12 or 15 movies that I've written early drafts of, or I've outlined, or started, or they're just pitches or whatever. So that when people ask, what else have you got? I can, based on I don't ask them what do they want. I basically say, I have based on having had a conversation with them, I know if they're interested in family-friendly Christmas movies. Like, well, I have family-friendly Christmas movie that's sort of in that a few of them that are sort of in that Hallmark vein, but I also have one with, magical realism and Santa Claus in it. I have, do you want horror movies? Well, I got horror movies. I've written a comic book. I've written those other things. So based on what I think they will like is what I will pitch to them. Or I can just say, here's a document of everything that I've got. Tell me what you'd like to see. Now, if I haven't written it yet, I avoid making promises of when they're going to get it or whatever. But if they're interested in one thing that I wrote, I say, thanks, I'd love to send it to you. Can I get your business card, get your email or whatever? And then I take it and off I go. Nobody is going to care if they have to wait 6 weeks for the thing that you promised them. As I said, they've got a million things going on, right? So they're not sitting there hitting refresh on their email, hoping that it comes in. You can then move it to the top of your list and say, such and so, Sally is waiting for this, so I'm going to move it to the top of my list and work on it and write it. And then you write it, and you write it well. And in the meantime, I suggest, as you meet these people, go into Google, set up a Google alert for the person who you met, and then you'll get notified anytime they turn up in the news, so that when they turn up in the news, hey, they just got something greenlit or they got a movie produced or something, you can shoot them an email to the email address they gave you and say, hey, remember me? I'm the one who wrote, the chipmunk that saved Cincinnati. I know I haven't gotten it to you yet, just doing a rewrite on it, but I wanted to congratulate you on doing this. All of a sudden, you're having a conversation with somebody who will come to like you until the script is ready. Lucy is also a published author with poems and short stories in German. I mean, maybe it's a calling card. I mean, if you've won awards with your short stories and you have a fan base of 5 million readers around the world, then yeah, that's going to help you, for sure. If it's something that they might have heard of or whatever, but good story is what we make. But the industry is not necessarily, they're not necessarily about making good stories into good movies of stories. I think that a good story is one strategy by which they can make a profit on a movie, but there are other strategies as well. I mean, we've all seen great big hits that were not necessarily great stories, but they had great performances, or they had funny bits, or they were terrifying, even with no story really to hang anything on. A lot of action movies are just, the story is just an excuse to get them from one action sequence to another. And that's fine too, man. Sometimes it's a spectacle. I love a roller coaster. It's fun. And people want to go, particularly when things are so bleak as they are sometimes these days, people just want to have fun when they go to the movies. So it's, or they want something they can watch with their kids or whatever. So whether or not the story's any good. I mean, I don't have kids, but I know people who have kids who are like, ugh, if I have to watch whatever movie again, I'm going to kill myself because it's so bad. And then you have ones who are like, I don't mind watching Frozen a bunch of times because the songs are good. So you can, it's a calling card if it means something to the person to whom you're sending it. It's not a calling card if you're proud of it. I mean, I think it's great that you wrote things that got published and that you're proud of, and particularly you got paid for them. But if I show up in a pitch and I say, me, I'm the one who wrote and produced that movie that lost the investors a ton of money, that's not a very effective pitch, because I'm not taking the other person's perspective into consideration when I make such a pitch. Look, you learn a lot by writing short stories. You learn about writing efficiently. You learn a lot from writing poems, about writing metaphorically and with great imagery. And your love of writing is going to serve you as a writer, even if you're doing things just for yourself. I don't know if any of you have a thing, but I have a signature move in all of my screenplays where, okay, so I wrote a screenplay a while back and gave it to some people who I trust to give me notes back. And at one point in the movie, a character uses the word detritus. He hands the bag to somebody and says, this is your detritus that you dropped. Your detritus, he says. And every person I gave it to, every single person said, oh, change that line of dialogue, man. Nobody uses the word detritus. I bumped on it. It's no good, whatever. But I was so committed to that line of dialogue, I declined to take the note. And to this very day, I work the word detritus into every script that I write, strictly out of spite for that note that I got so many times early on in my career. It's become a bit of a signature to the point where friends of mine, if they watch a movie where someone says the word detritus, it's like, hey, Bob, did you work on that script? I see the word detritus in there. It's also a cheeky way for me to like sort of sneak my little signature in there in a rewrite that I'm doing where I don't get credit. People will know it's by me if the word detritus shows up. But very often I put it in the script and then it gets cut in the final cut of the movie anyway. So it's mostly just for me. Put stuff for yourself in the writing. Okay, we're getting close to 8:30. If anyone else has another question, that is fine. If you don't, that's fine too. I'm starting to fade a little bit. So I'm happy to take one last question if there is one. And if not, I will just ask you to please email me at my email address right there in the chat. And I will be happy to answer your questions there, or for any more information on the courses I have coming up, or for one-on-one consultations. I really appreciate you guys coming tonight, and anyone watching on the recording later on. I hope to see you live next time, and then we can have ongoing conversations. I'll make sure to spend some time in the UK Screenwriters Facebook group tomorrow. If anyone has any like last moment things they didn't think of, or they didn't want to broadcast their question to the whole page or whatever. Otherwise, hey, please friend me here on Facebook. I like being on social media with other writers, new writers, writers with different experiences than mine. There's just as much for me to learn as there is for me to teach. So with that, I will say thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Teddy. Thank you, everyone else who's been watching. I really appreciate you spending some of your precious, valuable time with me. And I hope to see you all out there in the world of screenwriting very, very soon. Bye-bye.